The Vessel of Eternal Damnation drifted through the void, its haunting silhouette a mere speck against the vast expanse of space. Captain Elijah Vance stood on the bridge, his weathered face illuminated by the eerie glow of the control panels. He had accepted this mission with a mix of anticipation and unease, knowing that the derelict spacecraft held untold secrets within its labyrinthine corridors. As the crew prepared to board the abandoned vessel, an inexplicable sense of dread settled over them. Dr. Amara Singh, the ship's medical officer, couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She had heard whispers of the spacecraft's dark history, tales of madness and disappearances that had become the stuff of legend among space explorers. Engineer Nasim Qureshi and deckhand Siobhan O'Malley suited up, their movements precise and deliberate as they checked their equipment. The airlock hissed open, revealing a yawning darkness that seemed to beckon them forward. With cautious steps, they crossed the threshold, their flashlights cutting through the gloom to reveal the twisted, biomechanical interior of the abandoned ship. As they ventured deeper into the vessel, the walls seemed to pulse with an unseen energy, as if the ship itself were alive. Strange whispers echoed through the corridors, barely audible but unmistakably present. Captain Vance felt a chill run down his spine as he realized that the spacecraft was not merely abandoned. It was aware of their presence. Suddenly, the ship shuddered violently, sending the crew stumbling. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into complete darkness. In the oppressive silence that followed, a low, malevolent hum began to emanate from the very structure of the vessel. It was then that Captain Vance knew they were in for a nightmare beyond their wildest imagination. As the crew ventured further into the bowels of the ship, the corridors began to twist and turn in impossible ways. The walls seemed to shift and change, disorienting their sense of direction. Engineer Qureshi tried to pull up a map of the vessel on his handheld device, but the screen only displayed a chaotic tangle of lines and symbols that made no sense. Dr. Singh noticed strange, organic growths spreading across the walls and ceiling, pulsating with a sickly, bioluminescent glow. She reached out to touch one, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear, but recoiled as the growth seemed to reach back, tendrils of viscous fluid grasping at her fingertips. Deckhand O'Malley's flashlight beam fell upon a series of grotesque, biomechanical sculptures that lined the corridor. The figures were twisted amalgamations of flesh and metal, their faces contorted in expressions of eternal agony. As she stared, transfixed by the horrific sight, the sculptures began to move, their limbs twitching and jerking in a macabre dance. Captain Vance's mind raced as he tried to make sense of the horrors they had witnessed. He had heard tales of ships that had ventured too close to the edge of known space, their crews driven mad by encounters with eldritch entities beyond human comprehension. Could this vessel be one of those ill-fated ships, now a floating tomb haunted by the ghosts of its former occupants? Suddenly, a piercing scream echoed through the corridors, causing the crew to freeze in their tracks. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated terror, and it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. As they listened, the scream distorted and warped, becoming a cacophony of tortured voices that filled their minds with visions of unimaginable suffering. As the crew pressed on, the ship's malevolent presence grew stronger, seeping into their minds like a poisonous fog. Dr. Singh began to see visions of her past, twisted and distorted by the vessel's influence. Memories she had long buried resurfaced, now warped into nightmarish scenes of guilt and regret. Engineer Qureshi's rational mind struggled to comprehend the impossible architecture that surrounded them. The corridors seemed to fold in on themselves, leading to rooms that couldn't possibly exist within the confines of the ship. He felt his sanity slipping away, replaced by a growing sense of despair and hopelessness. Deckhand O'Malley's thoughts turned to the crew members who had come before them, those unfortunate souls who had been trapped in this floating nightmare. She imagined their final moments, their minds shattered by the ship's relentless assault on their psyches. The thought of sharing their fate filled her with a cold, creeping dread. Captain Vance fought to maintain his composure, knowing that his crew looked to him for strength and guidance. But even he couldn't deny the toll the ship was taking on his mental state. The whispers that echoed through the corridors grew louder, their words becoming clear and all too inviting. The ship wanted them to submit, to become one with its twisted, eternal existence, just as despair threatened to consume them. A faint glimmer of hope appeared in the form of a strange, pulsating portal. At the end of a long, winding corridor, the portal seemed to beckon to them, promising escape from the ship's nightmarish grasp. But as they approached, the ship let out an unholy roar of anger, its biomechanical walls quivering and convulsing in rage. The crew raced towards the portal, their hearts pounding in their chests as the ship's fury bore down upon them. The corridors seemed to stretch and elongate, the distance to their salvation growing with every step. The vessel's whispers turned to shrieks of rage, its biomechanical tendrils lashing out at them in a desperate attempt to prevent their escape. Captain Vance led the charge, his determination fueled by the knowledge that he could not let his crew succumb to the ship's eternal damnation. He dodged and weaved through the grasping appendages, his mind focused solely on reaching the portal. Behind him, Dr. Singh, Engineer Qureshi, and Deckhand O'Malley fought their own battles, both physical and mental, against the ship's relentless onslaught. As they neared the portal, the ship's final desperate gambit took form. The walls began to close in around them, the biomechanical material pulsating and contracting like a living, breathing entity. The crew's oxygen supplies dwindled, the air growing thick and heavy with the ship's oppressive presence. They knew that if they didn't make it through the portal in time, they would be crushed and consumed by the vessel's vengeful embrace. With a final burst of strength, Captain Vance lunged forward, his fingertips grazing the shimmering surface of the portal. The ship let out a deafening roar of anger and despair as the portal's energy engulfed the crew, pulling them away from the nightmarish realm and into an unknown destination. The last thing they saw before the blinding light consumed them was the ship's biomechanical heart, pulsating with an unholy rage that would forever haunt their dreams. The crew tumbled through the portal, their minds and bodies battered by the ordeal they had endured. They emerged into a strange, alien landscape. The sky above them, a swirling maelstrom of colors and shapes that defied comprehension. As they struggled to regain their bearings, a chilling realization dawned upon them. They had escaped the Vessel of Eternal Damnation, but at what cost? The ship's influence still lingered in their minds, a reminder that some horrors could never be truly left behind. The alien landscape stretched out before the crew, a twisted, surreal dreamscape that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Strange floating structures dotted the horizon, their angles and curves warping the very fabric of space around them. The sky above was a kaleidoscope of swirling colors, casting an eerie, ever-shifting light upon the desolate ground beneath their feet. As they explored this new realm, the crew began to feel a creeping sense of unease. The landscape seemed to respond to their presence, shifting and changing in subtle, unsettling ways. Shadows lengthened and distorted, taking on a life of their own, while whispers of long-forgotten terrors echoed in the empty spaces between the alien structures. Dr. Singh was the first to succumb to the psychological toll of their ordeal. Her mind, already fragile from the horrors of the ship, began to unravel, her perception of reality blurring with the twisted visions that haunted her. She wandered off into the alien landscape, her eyes glazed and unseeing, mumbling incoherently about the sins of her past and the eternal damnation that awaited them all. Engineer Qureshi and deckhand O'Malley clung to each other, their sanity fraying at the edges as they watched their crewmate disappear into the surreal dreamscape. They knew that they had to find a way back to their own reality, but the path seemed increasingly uncertain. The landscape shifted and changed around them, leading them in circles, always bringing them back to the same unsettling point of origin. Captain Vance, his mind and body pushed to the brink of exhaustion, made a final desperate attempt to lead his remaining crew to safety. He chose a direction and set off, his steps determined and unwavering, even as the alien landscape sought to confound and mislead him. But as they walked, a chilling realization dawned upon them. The Vessel of Eternal Damnation had never truly let them go. Its influence had followed them, seeping into the very fabric of this strange new realm, twisting it into a reflection of their deepest fears and regrets. They were trapped, not in a physical prison, but in an endless cycle of psychological torment, forever haunted by the ship that had claimed their sanity and their souls.